Hi, I'm Danny Kaplan. I'm one of the co-PIs of the StatPREP project. I teach at Macalester College in Minnesota. And my colleague here is Kate Kozak. Kate?
I'm Kate Kozak, and I'm one of the PIs also of the grant, and I teach at Coconino Community College in Flagstaff, Arizona.
And we're not sure whether you know that this webinar is about the curriculum guide that we've been establishing. You might well think it's about training for how to use Zoom, since so many thousands of professors over the last few days have learned that they're going to be using Zoom to interact with their students. We've used Zoom before, but you'll see that we also start beginner mistakes. So we apologize in advance for that. What we wanted to talk to you today is about materials that we've been developing that help to make a link between the StatPREP materials, so the little apps, tutorials, classroom lessons and such, and textbooks that you might be using. And probably this is a timely date because all of the StatPREP materials are suitable for online learning. And so there might be more inclination for people to start to use them. Kate?
Yeah, so as Danny was just alluding to, many of us are now going to be going online. I know when I come back from spring break, I will be teaching my classes online. And so it'll be an interesting experience for all of us. And one of the things that we do want to just mention, though this is not the purpose of this, but since it's timely, we thought we'd just kind of go through how we would do this for online instruction. So what I'm going to be doing is I am using Zoom to teach my class. And what I will do is be actually fortuitously introducing hypothesis testing the Monday after spring break. And so I will probably be using the t-test. So I wanted to share my screen just to show you how I would use that with my class. Sorry, I have a new computer and I got to figure out how to get things to be shared. So
your institution gave you a new computer to make it easier for you to work with your students.
Yes, yes. So can you see my the little app t-test?
Your t-test is up.
All right. So the first thing I would do is there are activities we can do with the students, and those activities are a different spot in the StatPREP website. I do want to show you the StatPREP website really fast. So this is our StatPREP website. Some of you are probably familiar with it and have worked with it in the past. And we have different information. This webinar will be posted. We will be able to do some resources. And one of the resources we have are activities for the little apps. And those are very, very useful if you want to do group activities. Now I have to admit, I don't do group activities all that well in my online classes. So it might be a little bit more challenging to do the group activities in your online classes this semester, especially if you've never done it. But you can use those for that. But my plan is to actually use Zoom and do kind of an interaction with my students. So I would go into the little apps, and I'd go down the little apps until I find the one I'm going to work with. And I'm going to be working with the 2-sample t-test. So I'm going to go ahead and open that one. And then what I would do, and not giving my students all that, is I would just copy this URL and then paste it into my learning management system for my students to access, so that my students don't actually have to go looking for how to find it. They can get straight to it. And then like I said, I'm introducing hypothesis testing. And so I would come into probably most likely use NHANES. And NHANES is the National Health and Nutrition, Danny.
Evaluation survey, of course.
Huh?
The National Health and Nutrition Evaluation Survey.
Evaluation survey. I always forget what the E stands for. All right, so I would probably use this one. I like BMI. I think it's very useful. Then I could show them what the mean is and look at that. I can hypothesize what I think the mean is. So I could find out what the mean is in my area, and I could place that and talk about that. And then we can talk about how the inference is made. But then I can also say, well, let's look at BMI for people who are physically active, and then look at the differences between them. So I'd have an interaction with my students, see what information they could come up with, and just give them an introduction to hypothesis testing this way, but it gives a visualization for my students to have. So that's probably what I would do the first Monday after spring break. I go on spring break next week, and then we could talk about all this information. But the little apps allow me to have a visualization. I normally use them in my in-person classes, but I also can do that online using Zoom. So that's what I would do. I would just give them this URL, and then I'd play around. I'd make sure I have an idea of which ones I want to talk about and use. Then the nice thing about this is I can actually take new samples and show them how to take different samples, create different results. And then if I want to get into confidence intervals, I could actually look at the confidence intervals instead. So it's kind of a useful thing to have. And I can pick out different ideas to play around with. So this is just a way to introduce it to my students. All right, so let's move on. So we'll stop sharing that.
So those of you who've seen the little apps before know that the data sets are not necessarily data from your textbook. In fact, it's unlikely that they are because we curated them specifically. So we're going to get back to that. But that's one of the ways in which the StatPREP materials have not been readily accessible to an instructor on a chapter-by-chapter basis. So what I want to do is show you the website that we've been, I'm getting a message here, that we've been creating. And I'm going to shift to my share screen in order to do that. Takes me a second to do this. And I'm hoping that you're looking at a web page dated March 12th, StatPREP Curricular Companions.
We are, Danny, thank you.
Okay. It would be nice if Zoom showed the person talking what screen was being shared in addition to the thumbnail. But okay, so as you know, if you participated in a StatPREP workshop or if you've browsed our website, you know that we've published a pretty large collection of interactive teaching materials, including little apps and classroom lessons, classrooms activities if you want, with instructor guides. And the instructor guides are not fundamentally meant for students, they're meant for instructors to work with the activities, to get oriented to the activities for students. And what we've done over the last couple of months is to take 3 statistics books and go through them chapter by chapter, section by section often, and create links to StatPREP materials that are relevant to each chapter or section. And I'm going to open up one right now, and then we're going to come back to what these books are and why we chose them. So right now I'm going to click on this link to OpenIntro Statistics, which is an online resource that quite a few StatPREP instructors are using, and instructors from all over. So hopefully, yep, there we go. So this is our curriculum guide. It's not a very massive thing. It's just meant to make links to activities and little apps. And often the activities themselves contain the link to the little app. So for OpenIntro Stats, their chapter 1, as you can see, is Introduction to Data. Oh, by the way, for those of you who've never seen OpenIntro Stats, here's a link to the online book. That's the great thing about online books. No waiting for desk copies, just go. Same for your students. Introduction to Data, they have an example about using stents and data basics. That's the section number in the book. And then here are 3 StatPREP activities that relate to data basics. And then going further in that chapter, experiments, and the section on experiments, and 2 StatPREP activities that relate to experimentation and causation and such. And we do that.
I do want to make the comment that we're not suggesting you do all of them. It's just these are ones that you can do to help introduce this material.
Right. As you look as you're deciding what to teach, you can look through these at a glance, just from this one sheet, click on them, and you can see which ones might be appropriate or attractive for your class. Often, because StatPREP is about data-centric statistics, often there are chapters that have very little connection with the StatPREP materials. And one might say, well, the proper response is for StatPREP to produce materials for those kinds of chapters, like probability from the OpenIntro text. And that could be a worthwhile thing for some people, but we have to stay focused on our mission, which is data-centric statistics, not augmenting the traditional curricula for statistics. But there are lots and lots of collections of apps and lessons out there. And it might make sense, depending on demand, for us to open this up so that whatever the source of the app is, or of the lesson, we can provide a link to it here. So conceivably, this could go beyond the StatPREP materials. We'll wait and see what the demand is for that. And then another aspect of this one particularly are these things called extended comments. And we've only done these for OpenIntro, but we give some detail about individual things. So for example, in section 1.1, there's an activity that we suggest involving using the JitterPlot app and asking students to identify which is the explanatory variable and to estimate from the graph the proportions of, in this case, stroke and no stroke. This is an example about cardiac stents and their impact. And we've gone through many of the sections that are relevant and provided some examples of, it's still very much in draft form, but some examples of comments and activities. For example, they say the central limit theorem is incredibly important. Well, Danny Kaplan himself does not agree with that. But let me go back. That's the OpenIntro. And then here is back to the home page for this website. There'll be a link to this on the statprep.org site. Here's a link to the home page for the curricular guides. And you can see the 3 books, OpenIntro Stats, Statistics with Technology, and Elementary Stats by Triola. I guess it's often just called Triola. Those are the 3 books that we've taken a stab at. And Kate, you have comments about why we did those books, or there's so many that we could have done?
There are so many books that are out there. OpenIntro is an open source book, so we've realized that this is one that even if you're not using it for your own classes, you can actually supplement with it and see where we put those materials into that course, and maybe then it'll help you figure out for your own book. The same with Statistics with Technology. That's actually a textbook that I have written. Danny doesn't like the title, and I keep wanting to change it, but I haven't done that yet. But the
also open source.
Also open source. So these are just opportunities for to use. And then we picked Triola because we are hearing from a lot of people that are in the 2-year college realm, at least, that this is a textbook that is being used by many schools around the nation. So we thought we should tie in with one of the more popular books that are out there. There are other popular books out there. The Lock 5 textbook is very popular, and we could also go into looking at those opportunities. But there are other books that are out there. These are just the 3 that we thought might be more because of the open sourceness of the first 2 and the fact that Triola is used by an awful lot of at least 2-year college faculty around the nation.
Right, so our first criterion in choosing the books, at least the initial books that we're doing, is that they be freely available to instructors and to students. And I think it's pretty obvious why that would be a nice criterion. It's not the only criterion. For example, Triola is not open source. It's a commercial textbook, and we're not endorsing the use of any commercial textbook for statistics, but we know what StatPREP faculty are using, and this is a very commonly used book, and it's especially common among instructors who aren't StatPREP participants. And so who have been more or less satisfied with a conventional approach to teaching stats that doesn't emphasize data. And of course, we want to be able to reach out to that. There's one other open source book that we considered, and I would endorse this book for teaching statistics. So it's published, so you can buy it from the publisher, but it's also available online and open source, which I think is a nice combination, because then the student who wants to have a paper copy can get it, but the students who don't have to shell out the money. I think that's also true for OpenIntro Stats. Kate, I'm not sure if it's true for your book as well.
You can buy a hard copy version of my book if you want to.
Okay, but you don't have to.
You don't have to. But some students like a paper version.
Why didn't we do statistical inference via data science? It's a great book by Chester Ismay and Albert Kim. I really recommend you take a look at it, but it's really very different. That's a good thing, in my opinion, but it's really very different from what any of our participants or statistics instructors are doing, except for an early adopter tranche who have taken this up. And the statistical inference via data science starts to teach data science concepts like wrangling and visualization, and then introduces statistics in a very coherent manner through the mechanism of linear modeling. I think it's a really nice book, but it would be unfamiliar to most of our people. So we decided Triola, even though it's not for free, Triola would be a better choice for this initial set of books. And then two other obvious ones for us to do is the Lock 5 book, Statistics Unlocking the Power of Data. We've seen that that's very popular, and almost as popular is the Introduction to Statistical Investigations by Nathan Tintle and Beth Chance and George Cobb and such. Those are very nice books also, but we only have so much time, and we're gonna wait till we get some feedback about what people want.
I also want to mention that the Lock 5 book and the Introduction to Statistics Investigation uses resampling and bootstrapping methods, and at least a lot of two-year college faculty their curriculum doesn't actually have that in it. So that's why another reason we didn't go for that one right away is because a lot of people may not be using them yet, because at two-year colleges, we have to deal with our articulation agreements. And so we haven't going to simulation methods and bootstrapping methods, but they are there. And I think actually it's a very good place to go. And we do want to look at those. The ideal thing is that you can actually look at the ones we have done and see, oh, this piece fits in here, and that's in this chapter in this book, and we can fit that in there. So even though we haven't done these other books, you can kind of look to see where we suggest you put them in the other ones and kind of find out where they can go. But again, as Danny says, as we get more input onto this, we will start to expand on the books we have on the list. And
to expand a little bit on that, this wasn't part of our plan that we would be giving this webinar as masses of schools switch to an online format for learning. It was, when we laid out our year's schedule in September, we did not have this on it. And the next thing I'm going to talk about, the little apps and the updates to them, we didn't also have them scheduled to be ready in time for COVID-19. We apologize. We didn't have very much foresight in that respect. I think we joined the rest of the world in that regard. But I would suggest to people listening that if you are switching to online instruction, that could be for you a major shift in what you do. And we know there's gonna be missteps. We know things are gonna go wrong, and we're gonna discover things that go right. But this is actually a really good time to try something new that you've always wanted to try with your class, because your class will still be mostly interested in the pedagogical changes as you go to online. They won't be so concerned that you're not following this chapter in the textbook. At least that's my suggestion. But I want to show another.
I also have the same suggestion, because I have taught statistics online in the past. I haven't done it in a while. but I'm going to be doing it very shortly in person in a couple weeks. But I'm going to try different things with the class because I can, and my students are new to this whole format themselves. They didn't sign up for this, and they're going to be experiencing a lot of different things. So experimenting with different ideas and bringing data into your classrooms this is a good time to try to do that.
Yeah.
And you
yeah.
probably won't make your curriculum anyhow this semester. So this is a good chance to kind of not worry so much about articulation.
And I guarantee that none of your online students don't have access to a computer. So they all do. Now, some of your students may be facing genuine hardship because they don't have ready access to a computer. And so they're not, they're gonna have trouble participating in an online format. But for those who do participate, you know that they've got access to a computer. So the next thing we want to talk about was data. So of course, every textbook has its favorite examples and data sets. And often these data sets are made online, although not always in a readily attainable format. One of the things we've tried to do is to bring the data from these books into the StatPREP ecosystem. And one way that shows up is in the little apps. Now, the next month's webinar is about the newly revised little apps. I'm going to show you one now, even though they won't be released until next month. Although I suppose if people are interested and willing to accept a beta, then we could provide links to the current versions of them. So I'm going to switch to a TTest little app. This, Kate showed you one earlier. This one is the updated one. And it has a completely different format. You can see this is the front page. These were designed to work reasonably well on a smartphone, to display on a smartphone, on that small type of screen, or on a tablet, or on a computer for that matter. But we tried hard to make them work well on a smartphone. And I'm not going to go into the details of this. You can see that up at the top are some buttons, and they may not make sense to you until you've read about how to use them. And at the bottom are icons that show different tabs that you can use in the little app. And so we're right now in the information tab with an I. I'm going to switch to the data tab. And this is where you choose the data set. And Kate, before you were using NHANES, right?
Yes.
And NHANES is one of the data sets that comes with the little apps. There are others, they just haven't been put into this. But we have incorporated data sets from the OpenIntro Stats. That was easy because they make them so readily available, from Statistics with Technology, and from Triola. So I'm going to go to Triola, for example. So right now there's a source package. Little apps is the one that contains the data that have been on the little apps since the beginning. But here's OpenIntro, Stats with Technology, the Mosaic package, the Lock 5 book, and here's Triola. And you can see this upload. Well, we'll talk about that in April. That's to provide a more general capability. But I'll go to Triola. And now all of the data sets published with Triola are available for you to use in your assignments or activities or class lessons or whatever it is. I'm going to go to one right now. It says TDS because that's Triola data set. They have a funny naming convention, but we added on the TDS. I'm going to go to this one, and this is a data set about waiting times in fast food restaurants. So I'll make the waiting time, which I think is seconds. All right, and already you can see the one variable being shown. Waiting time is on this axis, 100 to 250 seconds, looks like it's about typical. And then we'll divide it down by meal of the day. And so this one is comparing lunch and dinner. And I don't know what you can see from that. Maybe lunch you have to wait sometimes a little bit longer. That's probably important for someone who has to get back to work. but I'll zoom in on another graph, another tab. I'm going to make this a bit smaller so it fits on the screen. And then in this app, just like Kate showed you, you can put annotations on t-intervals. You can set what the confidence interval is going to be. And then the annotations show up. Right? And another feature of this is that you can freeze the display and compare it to another display, as for example, here I'm picking new samples. So we think these new little apps will be much easier to design lessons around. But the point now is that we've got Triola, we've got the OpenIntro data sets, we've got stats with technology, and so these names are names you find in that book, a different naming system. And we have a few others, including Lock5, for example. We haven't made the curriculum guide for that, but they make their data so readily available. How could we not have included it in this?
Danny, we have a couple questions that were asked.
Good.
And I think with the new apps, this hopefully will be fixed. But we know that we've had some problems with the little apps we currently have where.
Oh, I've lost your voice.
What was that?
You said with the new apps, and then I lost the audio.
Oh, so with the current apps we have, we've had some problems where we have too many students on and the system freezes up. And so the question is, how many students can be on a little app at a time? And then why are there limits to it?
The limits are for no good reason. They have to do with the way the little apps were built initially. And that was one of the reasons to revise them. So the way the little apps were built initially, and it's still somewhat of a mystery why we're seeing such poor performance. It's not always the case, actually, but why we're seeing such poor performance. These new ones were written from scratch, and they use a different framework, which we think will be much easier to keep running in a streamlined way. So we've been trying to learn from the lessons of the past. I can't give you a number. We're going to be doing testing over the next month. I think that next webinar, the release date is April 22nd. But that, of course, is a major concern, that students actually be able to use these things without frustration. And so we want to make sure that that's the case.
All right, and then the other question is that she's looking for a little app that would explain sampling distributions for proportion.
Okay, so one answer, there is none. One reason is that this is a kind of theoretical topic, and the little apps are always oriented centrally around data. So the central graph in a, I got rid of the data. The central graph in a little app is always data. And that's not true of theoretical apps. Response, what did I want? Oh, sorry. Just gonna. That's not true of, there we go. That's not true of most apps. There are, however, lots and lots of apps online from other sources. For example, the Lock5 have a set of apps that go with their book. Rossman and Chance have a great set of apps. There's one from the University of Pennsylvania. And somewhere on the StatPREP website is a list of many of these apps with links to them. And one of them, for sure, has the sampling distribution of the proportion and presumably allows you to change the sample size and the population parameter and such. That's not really about data, that's about theory. So we haven't put it into the little app series, but you can find something. If it's important to have things in little app format, that requires some thought how to do a theoretical topic. But we invite people who are interested in contributing to help us out. but first try the existing apps. They may do exactly what you need.
Thank you. So that's the end of our questions at the moment, but I'll keep watching.
Okay, I'm going to back out of this for just a minute. So that's, it seems like a trivial component to have the actual data from the textbooks show up in the little apps. And those data can also show up in any StatPREP material now because they are literally our packages that we've put together, or OpenIntro did that themselves, but they're literally our packages. And so we think that'll make it much easier for people to connect StatPREP materials to their textbooks. All right.
Okay.
I've already gone through a little bit the OpenIntro curriculum companion. I'm not sure that there's that much point in going through this more. That's the most complete one. And so we do want to solicit suggestions from users. So when you see something, when it's not telling you what you need to know, when you want something else, make a note of that. It would be great to post it on the MAA Connect site, just so that we have a record of it. Other people can see your suggestion and reinforce it. But we really want to solicit suggestions. This is really meant for the user, not for us. And so we've just tried to guess what format could be useful, and we're perfectly happy to expand things as we need to within the constraints of time. One thing that I'd like to point out that we learned in doing this is how challenging it can be to take a statistics textbook that's fundamentally oriented around statistics theory rather than around data, to take such a textbook and make it about data. And I thought I would show an example of how that works. For that purpose, I'm going to shift back to screen sharing mode. Okay, so I have to see how to do this. Screen share, desktop, share. You can't see these things, I guess, as I'm doing them. I'm going to go to 2 Triola data sets. All right, now, can you see that? This is a spreadsheet-like display of
Yes.
Burger King lunch and McDonald's lunch. You already saw those data, actually. That's the waiting time. And this is the format that the Triola book publishes, or their website publishes these data in. And of course, if they hadn't published them on their website, we wouldn't have been able to do anything with it. So that's great that they've published this. And they have 32 or 33 such data sets, and they're documented in the Triola book. So we haven't gone and redocumented them because anyone using Triola has the documentation already. And you can see there's 50 entries here. There's 8 columns, and you can see pretty readily how the columns are organized. McDonald's lunch, McDonald's dinner, Burger King lunch, Burger King dinner, Wendy's, and Dunkin' Donuts. So there's 4 chains and 2 meals, giving 8 columns altogether. And the number in each cell is the number of seconds that somebody, I don't know who went to 400 chains to order a meal, but so that's a heroic effort. And if the person is still living, my congratulations to them. But the number is the seconds that they waited for their order to be filled. And they didn't record how long it took them to eat the meal or to recover from the meal. That would also be interesting data. And you could see it would be difficult in this format to add something like, how many calories did the meal had, or how long did it take to eat, or whatever, what the price was. There are other variables that one might have done while going through, or what the composition of the meal was. Other variables that one might have considered in collecting these data. That's fine. That's not the purpose that Triola had for them. But it's telling that it would be really hard to add such additional data. And the reason is one that's fundamental about the structure of data as it's structured professionally. So this is a spreadsheet. It's an electronic format. The column names are perfectly comprehensible. So in that sense, it's a professional presentation of data. But it ignores one of the most fundamental rules for data tables, a rule that's used throughout the statistics world and throughout the commercial world. And that rule is that each row should be one case. Okay, so row 1 should refer to something in particular. And it would be hard to figure out what that might be because row 1 actually is about 8 different meals at 4 different chains and 2 times of day. So it's possible that row 1 reflected the data collector's first tour of these 4 chains, or it's possible that row 1 was one person sent out to collect these data, and row 2 was someone else collecting those data. That's possible. If that were the case, I would expect there to be a variable that says who that person was, or maybe it's just implicit that this was person 1, person 2, person 3, and so on. But I think what it is that 107 being next to 84, irrelevant. We might as well have taken the 152 from row 8 and put it next to 107. So here, the row is an arbitrary construction. It doesn't contain any data. And the row itself doesn't contain, it's not a unit of observation. It's just a spreadsheet row. And it can be advantageous to follow the standard protocol for storing data. And so for several of these data sets, what we've done is gone through them and rendered them into a modern format. So Triola's data set is TDS 25 fast food. And then TDS 25 narrow is our take. And I'm going to show you what that looks like. And you're going to say, well, what's the difference? So here's a modern format. Each row is one meal. What do we measure about that meal? Well, of course, how long we waited. But also what we measure is which meal was it? Or which chain was it? Or as a SOP to the Triola organization, we give both of those combined, but that's just redundant with chain and meal. And what this means, for example, we can look at weight and we can see which were the shortest weights, whether they were lunch or dinner, or here are the longest weights, 466 immediately comes up just by looking at the data. What this means is that we can use standard software, standard graphics to present, say, a plot of wait time as a function of meal, or wait time as a function of chain, right? So these data are presented in a way that in Triola you can't use for other examples. For example, analysis of variance, ANOVA, one-way ANOVA, wait time versus chain. There's 4 chains. A t-test example, wait time versus meal. There's 2 meals. Or even a 2-way ANOVA, wait time versus chain and meal. And in addition, if we had wanted to add things like the total cost of the meal, or the composition of the meal, or how the reviewer felt the meal tasted, that would just be a matter of adding new variables. So what we found often is that textbooks sometimes sacrifice being accurate about how data should be stored professionally. And that's unfortunate, because if we want to teach students about using data, we really have to teach them about how you store and manage data properly. So this surprised me to see the data in Triola, which I hadn't encountered before, to see them stored this way. And I can understand why, right? We're going to make a distribution plot of one column, McDonald's dinner. But really, and they're going to ask you, what is the mean? What is the variance and such? But really, it's probably more interesting to students to be comparing these things. And if you made a scatter plot of McDonald's dinner against Burger King dinner, well, that would be utterly meaningless because this 84 has nothing to do with that 101. It might as well have been that 124. So the data organization misleads you into thinking that you could get a meaningful scatter plot, when in fact the pairing of the rows is arbitrary and random. So that's my little editorial about how sometimes data are not organized in a way that serve our broader purpose.
I just want to reiterate what Danny's been saying is that's one of the things of why we don't play data very well. It's because we get data in these formats that are not conducive to answering better questions. And if you have it in this other format that Danny is talking about, it's called tidy data, then we actually get a chance for you to say to your students, what would be more interesting to ask about? What question would you like to know? And that allows you to actually have that discussion with your students of how the data can help you to answer questions you want, as long as it's in this format. And one of the questions I always ask my students is, what are my variables and what are my units of observation? I just remind them, if it's in this nice format, the unit of observation is just a row. In this case, it's a meal. So it's a very useful way to look at the data and then entice better questions with your students about data, instead of just find the mean. So that's what I like, the new way he's doing this, and what we're trying to go with StatPREP, of getting you to look at data better. All right. So
that's our brief introduction to these curricular guides. Again, very much a work in progress. We're very open to suggestions for things that would help instructors, and that's our objective, is to help instructors move to a data-centric approach to teaching statistics. I've got a few announcements, Kate.
Well, I did want to mention that I will be posting this link to this companion, to this curricular companion site on the StatPREP site, and also put it on our MAA Connect site, so that you have access to it that way. So you'll be seeing those put onto the website, the statprep.org site, and our MAA Connect site. Go ahead and with the announcements, Danny, sorry.
Okay, and of course, we're going to stay online for those who want to ask questions or make observations. This being March 13th, Friday the 13th, it may surprise you to hear that this is our February webinar. For travel reasons, we had to cancel the original scheduled date 2 weeks ago and do it today. But the actual March webinar is on March 26th at 1 p.m. Eastern, that'd be 10 p.m. Pacific. And Carrie Morgan Locke, it's just the Locke is always there. Carrie Locke Morgan, right, that's
it's Locke Morgan, yeah.
Yeah, right, I wrote it down wrong, is giving the March webinar. She's at Penn State, and of course, the Locke 5 book has been very influential in helping people think about statistics from a randomization, resampling, simulation point of view. So Carrie is going to be giving the webinar on March 26th. On April 23rd, Jennifer Ward and I will be leading a webinar about the new Little app. So they'll actually be released by that date. And I'm very excited about doing that, because I think the new Little apps give a lot of functionality beyond what the old Little apps had. And as you've seen, they also have a lot more data and the opportunity to upload data. On May 8th, Tim Hesterberg from Google is going to be leading the webinar at 3:30, May 18th, 3:30 Eastern, so 12:30 Pacific. And he's the co-author with Laura Chihara of a great textbook about probability and statistics. I'm not quite sure. I haven't seen the outline of his talk yet, so I can't tell you. But I expect that many of you've seen it?
I think it's going to be about resampling. So those who would like to know more about resampling, this would be a great way to look a little bit more at that. Go ahead, sorry, Dave.
And then finally, of course, we are completely aware of the many new restrictions that are coming into place, I think for good reason. I'm supportive of these restrictions. I think they're genuinely helpful and life-saving. But we're aware of these, and there is, I think, a question of what we should do about the summer workshops. For right now, we are leaving them scheduled as planned. So they're at the end of May and the beginning of June. That may change. I don't think we need to make a decision at this point. I think that over the next month, the decision will be made for us one way or the other. And so we'll keep our website up to date about those workshops. If you're interested in attending one, I encourage you to apply, even though it's not completely certain that they will be held in the expected format. But if you apply, then at least we have a way to reach out to you if it happens or if they have to be rescheduled in some way. So you can see that on the StatPREP website, but I think it's best for us just to wait a month before we make a decision.
So I do want to mention those of you who went to a webinar, a workshop last year, and we now have another one in the same place. So like Tarrant County College had one last year, and they're going to have a second one this year. Those who went last year, you just need to let the hub leader know, just let Thomas know that you're planning on coming again. You don't need to reapply. But if you haven't come to one, you'll have to apply.
I would just finish myself by reminding you. Yes, that's right. And the application is very straightforward. Right. And if they do go ahead as scheduled, I don't know how likely that is, but if they do go ahead as scheduled, but in your particular circumstance, you're embargoed out by a state restriction about travel or something like that, well, of course, we understand. These are historic times, actually. This is a situation that the world has not faced since 1918. And we're now in a completely different technological and communications environment. So a lot is going to be changing in your life over the next, I will say 3 months. That's not usually what people say, but that's my opinion. A lot is going to be changing in your life. And there's an expression, given lemons, make lemonade. I think the lemonade here is an opportunity to start to switch your teaching to something that's more data oriented and I think more suitable for sharing online. But that's it for me. That's the end of my editorial.
I don't have anything else to share. I do want to say, those of us who are going to this new format in a few weeks or even next week, you know, there's lots of us out there in the world that have been doing this and have experience with teaching online and are going through the same thing. And it would be helpful for all of us to share. So you can certainly go to the MAA Connect StatPREP community and put out questions of what you might need help with and where you need to go and what needs to be done. So we certainly can help and give our insights, and certainly others can share their insights. So please do that. We also really would appreciate it if you do use the companion sites with the textbook you're using, that you let us know how that's working and what you might like to see different or what you think is actually useful. So that information would also be useful for us. Good luck, and thank you for coming.
Yes, thank you for coming, and we'll stay online for people who have questions, but we'll close out the recording of the webinar at this point. Good luck, and good luck with the many, many challenges you're going to face over the next weeks.
Yes.